it, 'cause it was there. We're art sluts.
Welcome back, everybody who's been following Art Sluts Radio. You've heard a lot about us, and today we've got two different topics we want to talk about. One is the obvious one, the Trump in the room. But how does this impact feminism? And I guess we're going to find out, but I'm sure Teri has some thoughts on that. Teri?
Well, I just don't, first, really, I have to remember, it helps me remember what a privileged little bubble I live in.
Me too.
Number one, as a woman with a higher education, meaning, I have 2 master's degrees. Any woman with 1 master's degree is less than 2% of the population of America. Wow. Now, that was a statistic from the 80s when I got my degree at the UMC. So it may be different from now. But I'm pretty sure, even if a higher percentage of women have an education, that it's not a vast number. Right? And it may change somewhat if we're also counting non-binary and trans women, right? Which I just consider women, I don't make the exception. But in this case, because we're looking at sociology and trends, right? There are more people now with those identities who are educated and have educational degrees, right? So even when in the 80s, my uncle, Mark, who is a Trump supporter and who is a survivor of Vietnam. He's a Vietnam vet, has some real severe trauma and mental health issues, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm sure.
At the time, the beginning of the cultural split between, I think the culture wars, you could say, are happening. Right? It seems like it just keeps accelerating.
Or continuing, really.
But now, it's like there's almost, in a science fiction way, in a speculative fiction way, there are 2 alternative futures happening.
Yes.
And they're getting wider and wider apart. So back to my beautiful
your uncle.
He just had so much other personal things I won't bring up. Just a very traumatized individual from my family of origin who is not that much older than me, right? He's like 10 years older than me. So I'm 62, he's like 72, right? Because my dad and my aunt, they were all like almost 10 years apart, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that when he came back from Vietnam, felt like he was reviled, like he had risked his life. Many of his friends died. He was exposed to extremely traumatic situation. And then when he came back, he felt like, because the anti-war protest was largely being led by liberal college students, right? He felt rejected and upset by that. His position with me has always been, excuse me for saying this word, that I'm a libtard, that I went to school and that my education brainwashed me against my own people and my own interests, right? And so he, even a few years ago, was upset with me because I became friends of him on Facebook, and friends of mine were speaking out against Trump, and he got very upset about that. And from my perspective,
did you tell him that he was a snowflake?
No, I did not. He called me that I'm a snowflake, right? So, and I don't want to accelerate the war in my own family, right? But his opinion of me is not based on who I actually am or what I actually do. It's based on a caricature of it. Now, I want to talk about some difficult things. I mean, one, and we can just agree, you and I, that we're going to be able to talk about anything. Can we agree on that?
Yes.
And that if there's something that you or I say to each other that is upsetting, that we will slow down and take the time to repair it, either on the podcast or elsewhere off the podcast, because this is a kind of agreement I find I have to kind of front load any conversation I'm having with anyone.
At this point, I'm like, fuck it all. Like, I just feel like, you know what? I mean, I cannot I cannot self-censor, and that's the other topic we're going to talk about, but
Definitely, because why are we censoring ourselves and being super careful when there are people saying things like, these black people have to report for slavery? I mean, people actually sent.
Right.
So the inflammatory violent, intentionally malicious, and oppressive things are happening. Meanwhile, we art sluts are trying to be super. So that the distinction in the culture that I did get educated out of my class background into, I mean, clearly.
It's giving a damn and not giving a damn.
It's understanding sociology or not understanding sociology. Like that's in fact, the thing I was working on is me teaching other people what sociology is, what constellational thinking is and means, what disability justice is and means, what transformative justice is and means. How do we restructure our culture around nonviolence and loving kindness? Or how do we continue to veer off into...
Let me ask you a question related to that, because from that standpoint, your situation is very much, from what I observe, you're the boss.
Oh, absolutely.
You are the queen. And that, in a weird way, is dictatorial in that sense. So how do you create a society that's loving and kind without demanding it and requiring it?
Yeah, and this is exactly what's going on, okay, right? So I was just in this brilliant class called Embodied Ethics with my friend Christiane Palmas teaching. And one of the things that I did that she's helping me understand is that I use the terms white supremacy or misogyny or racism as a kind of name calling, right?
Yeah.
And I use them when I want to cancel someone, right? So how do we have a transformative justice community that calls people in instead of a call out thing that destroys people, right? And I think that this is actually super relevant, right?
Yeah, right.
Like I could just say my uncle is a effing bleepity bleep, blah, 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 Trump supporter, blah, blah, blah. And I could cancel out his humanity.
Yet you're being sensitive to his mental illness and his life experience.
And I include him. I still talk to him, right? I'll call him and talk to him and see him. But I have the impulse, because I am frightened by his behavior, I have the impulse to cancel him. So how do we not have cancel culture, right? And how do I have an elevated position as an educated woman, right, without being attacked? Well, I get attacked all the time, but how do I create culture? So basically that's what I'm doing, is teaching other people how to have communication agreements.
Hey guys, I thought with everything we're talking about, a good song to check into would be one of Pam's called Ronald Reagan Had a Farm. Let's take a listen.
This song Pam wrote after the election, and this is our last tune, and take it away.
But first, from George Orwell. 12 voices were shouting in anger, and they were all alike. No question now what had happened to the faces of the pigs. The creatures outside looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again, but already it was impossible to tell which was which.
Well, Ronald Reagan had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on his farm he had no trees, E-I-E-I-O. A leaf fell here, a leaf fell there, here a leaf, there a leaf, everywhere the trees leave, everywhere the trees leave. Ronald Reagan had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on his farm he had a bush, E-I-E-I-O. An oink oink here, an oink oink there, and here an oink, there an oink, everywhere an oink oink. Ronald Reagan had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on his farm he had a shack with E-I-E-I-O, with quack quack here and quack quack there, and here quack there, quack everywhere quack. Ronald Reagan had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on his farm he had a well, E-I-E-I-O. It was deep and dark and dry as hell. Many felons they called it all over. E-I-E-I-O. Around the farm he had defense, E-I-E-I-O. The bang bang here and a bang bang there, here a bang, there a bang, everywhere a bang bang. Ronald Reagan had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And on his farm he had a bomb, E-I-E-I-O. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down.
I'm really interested in the topic of self-censorship versus, you said state censorship, but I think it's any kind of organization censorship. You know, it could be a church, it could be...
Well, fascism is going to be state and federal censorship. So that's what the most frightened about. And I recently read, and this is very controversial, I recently read a really potent article on autostraddle. about how the state and feds have been demanding an allegiance to Israel and a censoring of pro-Palestinian positions, that in itself is already a form of fascism that's been in place for some time. And I think that has a lot more to do with, not a lot more, has quite a bit of influence that is underplayed or misunderstood or just ignored for what happened in the presidential election. I know a lot of people that wouldn't vote for Kamala Harris because the Democrats have a pro-Israeli financial position. And that in itself, and whether is that anti-Jewish or Zionist, people's inability to distinguish those two things.
I feel very unresolved about that whole issue because number one, it is as complicated as it can get, and I have a lot of Jewish friends.
Yeah, and partners. I mean, Heidi is Jewish. Yeah,
and I hear from them, just really, having a lot more
anti-Semitic.
Anti-Semitic, thank
Semitism. You. Anti-Semitism.
Lewis would be laughing right now. Anti-Semitism, exactly. I do think that there's issues of just, number one, like war, like enough. And then there's also issues of cultural contrast and cultural hierarchy going on for sure. But I don't know enough about that situation to say one way or the other yet.
I could say that I have been very consistently a nonviolent, anti-war person, anti any kind of war.
Right.
And that I am very, on principle, it causes me emotional distress that my tax dollars that I work and give my money to the government, and then the government subsidizes war. And that my tax dollars, right, are paying for killing people.
Yeah, a lot, yeah. And damaging the environment and all kinds of stuff.
All of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't and I'm sad about that, and I don't know what to do about that. I mean, I don't know how to live without a government, right? Because the things that the government provides in terms of hopefully Social Security, which I'm almost the right age to receive.
I know. I'm so close, but I'm a little bit nervous about that. I'm nervous about healthcare.
Right.
As far as feminism goes, unfortunately, I feel somewhat resigned to going backwards, which is, I know, wrong, and I'm not gonna not continue to fight against it, but I feel I just can't believe it. I think I'm still like in denial about what's happened, how quickly it happened, really, when you think about it. It's like boom, 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 Citizens United, then Supreme Court, and then all of a sudden reverse Roe versus Wade. And
so wanted to step out here for just a second from our conversation with me and Teri. Teri brought up a lot of great points about living in a bubble and all that. And I realized that I was pretty quiet during this session, and I think I was just kind of in total shock, even though I knew it was possible that he was going to win. I just couldn't believe that we lost the election, and in essence, we lost our freedom and our position in society. Women make up 60% of the workforce. So we're basically doing all the work, running the world, but we don't have any power. That is something that I had hoped that with a female president would show that America was ready for a female president, and they are not. So if everybody tells you it was about abortion or the economy or some other issue, it was about there is still sexism is just huge in our society. And the status quo currently, the mainstream is older, typically white men, and they have taken over. And make no mistake, the power they seek is oppression over women. They are, as usual, intimidated by strong women. And so thinking about the civil rights movement, It started with a sanitation workers strike, and then there was a coalition of young, mainly white students who got together with African Americans in their community and joined together. That was the seeds. That's how it grew. We can't do this alone. So obviously, I'm very comfortable on the fringes, and my community, the people that I relate to and feel most comfortable with, are musicians and artists, the gay, the trans community, African American community, and basically people from all other countries. I love a rainbow coalition. So that is my bubble that I've created that feels great. It is going to take a coalition. So it's not going to be just women who are going to be able to make equality happen. It's going to also be men. So it is important, and I think for a future show it'd be interesting to talk about the position of men in transforming our society in a positive way. So this whole thing, what we're expecting, feminism in the age of Trump, is that obviously there's going to be limited access to health care. More women will be dying. But there's also plans to limit birth control, which makes no sense. I mean, if the status quo of aging, rich, primarily Christian men, air quotes, wants to increase the population, is it to increase the population in an environment that's already stretched its resources for food, water, and space? No, obviously it's to prevent women from entering positions of power and from making changes to protect our citizens. Women are rapidly losing their freedom. Kamala was the most qualified candidate for president I can imagine ever seeing. And growing up in the 60s and 70s, I remember the Equal Rights Amendment. I remember watching it and being surprised that it didn't pass because it seemed so obvious. It is time to finally pass the Equal Rights Amendment that will address all of the issues that have been happening for women in our society. And anyway, that's my 2 cents. And let's get back to the interview with me and Teri and listen to some music.
I'm not sure there's a whole lot I can do beyond in my particular state because of the way they turned it back to the states, and other than I should mention that we're raising money for Planned Parenthood.
But I mean, you're personally doing something.
Yeah. Well, resign, I guess, is the wrong word. I just keep picturing The Handmaid's Tale, and I just go, how far off is that? Well, it's not that far off.
Well, and then let's just take a moment, okay? Well, I would just point out to you ways in which you have been autonomous the entire time that I've known you. So the movement that we were caught up with in Columbia, Missouri, was an autonomous art movement.
Yes.
Where we generated our own culture.
Right.
The punk rock movement in and of itself is an anarchist movement where we taught ourselves how to make instruments and music, and we said, I can do that. That's an act of agency and autonomy.
And also, it's existing on the fringes. It's like, oh, this is very familiar. I'm fine. I know how to exist on the fringes.
Witchcraft is like that. Any social change movement.
I've definitely existed in the mainstream because that's my business, and so that's really an interesting skill set, But it's super easy because people love to talk about themselves and they rarely ask you what you think. If you ask questions about them. So, people will tell me all kinds of things that I don't necessarily agree with, but, I
so
just
you're
listen.
saying
That's part of my business.
Your business is a mainstream thing because it's involved with capital and you're a person being of service and taking money for being of service. And that your role of providing service as a business person doesn't mean you have to be authentic in your expression of your values.
Mm-hmm. Although it's pretty obvious, anybody coming in, to the store will have a sense of the community that they're entering. And I've always believed strongly, even despite everything that's happened, that everybody should be welcome, like your uncle. You know?
All people are welcome.
Yes.
All people are valued. All people have a right to exist. Okay. So we are carrying on a very ancient lineage of creating temporary autonomous zones, which means anybody that comes under the influence of our work is stepping into a bubble where autonomy is honored and accepted and respected. And anyone that comes into the Living Love Revolution sanctuary, any of our events, they will be listened to. If they have a complaint, we'll listen to them. It doesn't mean we'll perfectly meet their needs, but we will not erase them, disregard them, etc., right? So basically, I just wrote down the foundational beliefs and values that I operate under so that they're transparent. I had to do that because I was doing festivals and people were coming in with other belief systems. I had to, no, that's not welcome here. This is why.
Wait a second. Stop right there, because I want to explore with you. So you said everybody's welcome, but then there are things where it crosses a line and you'll say, and
That's
how do
right.
you determine that, and how do you handle that?
Well, I have this, it's written in the communication agreement, and it says acts of violence will not be tolerated. Anybody acting violent will be contained as quickly as possible with as little drama as possible and escorted off the land territory where we are. Right? So when you cross this line and you're in our event, these things are, and then we distinguish microaggressions based on ignorant speech from malicious and intentional acts of violence, right? So that means that it's our job, since we're, if you'll excuse me, snotty libtards with educations, it's our job to educate people who haven't had access to that privilege if they're coming into our community, right? So I say, what you're saying, belongs in the frame of white supremacy, and I need you to think that through. If that's what you really believe, then that's an act of violence and we can't really participate with you. If you're saying that because you just don't understand that purity is part of white supremacy, then let me break that down for you and show you why that's not useful.
Has that ever happened, though?
Oh, yeah.
Really? Okay.
And more frequently, right? Like I had to just say to a very important and respected teacher of mine, you're asking me for coffee is an act of casual misogyny that I'm no longer willing to make an exception.
Right.
Because this is my focus, this thing, and that is actually an act of harm. Mind you, it's a small act of harm. It's a paper cut, right? You're not assaulting me sexually, but continuing to treat me in a non-equal second-class status, like I'm your administrative assistant all the time way, which is now noticeable by many people who have come to talk to me about it. So it's not just me deciding it's very painful. It happens all the time, right? I mean, or people are uncomfortable with my fat body taking up space. I go home with my lovers and my family, tell them, you don't have to wait on her like that. And I'm like, yeah, but every man in my family is waited on, and that's normative, right? So they cannot understand that they have such deeply embedded gender bias. Well, and this is true of many of my liberal friends. Like, why does Teri get to be the queen? Because I have earned authority, because I've done all this work.
You created it.
I created it. That's called earned authority. And I do the work of maintaining it. It is a lot of work.
I understand. I just find it so interesting how the parallels between me being a business owner and you being a goddess.
Sweetheart, it is a business. It's the Living Love Revolution Sanctuary. It's a church. It's a sanctuary church, because what I've done is said these principles are a culture. I'm generating a culture, and churches in this country are allowed to generate culture. And so I've just imitated what happens in a church, and I am a church.
So do you get to not pay taxes?
That's correct, Ann. But I have to keep track of them. I have to write like all that stuff. It's a lot of work, right? They have power over me and power with me. We're riding the line in between all these little spaces. And again, because I'm so smart and uppity, because I demand to be treated with as much authority, specifically spiritual authority, as a Christian minister.
Right.
Because I've thought it through. This is my religion. I am proselytizing. I do believe that the earth is an animate being whose life our lives depend on, who we have to take care of.
Well, and the whole music festival that I do, it generates
culture.
It generates magic.
Musical culture.
It's incredible in that way. And community, there's just so many things. It doesn't necessarily generate income, which is fine. That's fine.
Right.
It's just that it doesn't matter because it is
Why
a
aren't you at
community.
church, Ann?
I don't want to be a church. I don't want to be a church. Not interested.
Why? Say why.
Just
Because what you think a church does is evil?
no,
What?
like nothing like that. Just like, just not interested. You know, you reach a certain age and you're like, I'm interested in this. I'm not interested in that. Really that.
Okay.
I'm interested in your life, and I actually am very interested in religion. Like I'm very interested in how it
I know, you always have
functions in society. And
They're a little closer to
that's right.
heaven.
One of the songs that you really like of mine is "Closer to Heaven," and that song, when we recorded it, you sang on it. Kathy Wickle sang on it.
Kathy Wickle. There's another person you should interview, darling.
We've talked about the election a little bit.
Well, I don't know that I can't live, and I've gone in and out of this, Anne. I really felt when Trump got elected the first time that, I've been ignoring this, and I had misused my power and my influence by not paying attention
Yeah.
And then I paid attention really closely, and now I'm like, oh, I misunderstood because my education and my belief system,
Yeah.
my own privilege and power, and my ability to center it so consistently gave me the illusion that we were on an arc of evolutionary and liberatory growth and progress.
I
So I
did too.
kind of bought the neoliberal
I did too.
belief.
I have such optimism,
Right.
and it
But
was misplaced.
Devo predicted this de-evolution. We
Yeah.
are Devo, right?
Oh, right.
Right? Peak petroleum, like we hit a peak, and now we're actually de-evolving. So those of us, like I have a specific allegiance to queer magical lineages that I feel I need to keep alive and protected,
Yeah,
and I will do what I need to do to
for
keep
sure.
those alive and transmit them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm gonna definitely support anybody in my community. I mean, that's what I can do,
Yeah,
is support and encourage anybody in my community.
that's right. Support Indigenous and Black women's projects and works with money, with fucking cold hard cash. Because
Absolutely.
talking about it doesn't do shit, but making
Right.
sure they have what they need, resource wise, is important.
Yeah,
And what else do we do? Teach ourselves how to do herbal abortions, create spaces where those things are possible. You know, we have to create things.
access to medication. I mean, this is what I was not aware of, is that the most abortions are medically induced,
Yeah.
by medicine. And so
Yeah.
that I think that's one reason why the abortion issue was not a winning issue, is because I think young women felt that they would be able to get the pills they needed, and they didn't see it as a super big issue. And of course, the message of complications in pregnancy and miscarriage and all that is also not on the minds of young women. So, that's and I was going to ask you, how much of a factor do you think it was that Kamala Harris is female in getting elected?
And Black.
I know.
Massive. So
I
massive.
do too.
Have you ever read this book?
Brown
It's
Scars.
called White Tears, Brown
White
Scars.
Feminism Betrays Women of Color. That's a good book. Yeah.
It's by Ruby Hamad.
Okay.
It's really good. So I'm reading that, and I'm also reading Alice Wong's disability intimacy book.
Okay.
Uh,
Yes. Good.
disability justice.
Good. Well,
Being aware of, it had a lot to do with it.
yeah.
A lot to do with it. Like Bell Hooks, may she rest in power, said when Hillary Clinton did not get elected
Arrested.
or elected,
Arrested, right.
that the misogyny in our country is even less understood than the racism in our country. And it's like neck and neck. Intersectionality is a thing. But my point is just, we think that we're free.
Until next time, we're art sluts.
We're art sluts.
Art sluts.
Okay.
One more time.
All right. Thanks for listening to Art Sluts Radio.
Hey, if you identify with the Art Sluts, explore our herstory at artsluts.net. That's ARTSLUTS.net. And purchase downloads of our music wherever you stream music.
All contributions and purchases will go to support Planned Parenthood.
Currently, 21 states have limited access to women's health care, including abortion, and 15 of those have a total ban.
Talking about your abortion experience, voting, and donating to support abortion rights will make a difference.
I hate to leave you, baby. I don't wanna have to go. It's just my music.